Hi, guys. Welcome to Synchro Mystic. I'm Wayne McCroy. This is Richard Willett. Together, we're breaking down all of the various stories in the mainstream news, and we're going to connect some dots here back to the esoteric because, as is always the case, as much as I don't like it, it always, always, always ties back to the occult with all of it. How are you today, Richard? It's been a while since we've spoken, my friend.
It has. Yeah, good. Just got through Christmas. Kids aren't well, as per usual. They've got colds, passing it around. Been reading your new book that came out a few weeks back. You very kindly acknowledged me at the front. I really appreciate that. Didn't expect it at all. So I really appreciate it. It was a lovely thing to open on Christmas Day. So I've been reading your new book as well about Enoch and the Rosicrucian cosmology. Maybe we'll touch upon that today. But how was your Christmas?
Oh, it was relatively nice. It wasn't a bad Christmas overall. I had a little incident with my refrigerator, so we wound up having to get a new refrigerator. But other than that, things have been good. So,
Bloody
uh,
hell.
yeah, it's always something. You know how it goes. But at any rate, certainly, my new book is out there. If people want to pick that up, it's called "The Enoch Polarity and the End of Time," and we might touch on some of the precepts that are in there today as we go on further through the episode here because it relates one to one with everything going on in the world today, as we shall see. And of course, I acknowledged you in the book, Richard. You have been very much an inspiration to myself in doing this kind of thing because it really is of benefit to me to know that people are able to pick up the pieces that I'm putting down and take it the next step further. And you've done that with a lot of things I've laid down. And I do appreciate that. And we have had some wonderful conversations that have really brought some things out in the forefront of my mind that have helped to really connect the dots for me. So I appreciate you as much as you express your appreciation for that. So, with that being said, maybe we should look at some upcoming things here. The year 2026 is at the doorstep here now. And I think we're going to see some big changes coming this year. It is, after all, the year of the horse. And this is an absolutely imperative symbol to things going on in the world today and how things are going to take shape in 2026 because not only is it the year of the horse, it's the year of the fire horse. And as you know, Richard, fire is one of the very big components in all of the things that these controllers of this world like to do because they consider themselves the philosophers of fire. And of course, if you're talking about the fire horse, well, that's the red horse from the book of Revelation. So we're looking at apocalyptic type symbology just going into the new year here. So I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on that.
I think it's a lot of this stuff is going to come out, and everything is, in that sense, is everything's forged in the fire. So I think you're going to see the coming together of a lot of strands of this, especially the transhumanist element. A lot of I'm seeing now, and, with the Epstein stuff, it won't go away. You know, I've seen again the last 2 days, another thing's come out where a young girl said she was hooded, so put a hood over, horrific, over her head, and she was taken down some steps underground in on Epstein's island. I think, well, it doesn't sound like it relates. This is coming to the floor now. This, I think it's cloning. Everywhere I look, it's cloning. I've also got reading at the moment, as well as your book, is Virginia Gouffre's book, and I didn't know that she also has a blue butterfly tattoo as well. She's one of two
Interesting.
have got blue butterfly tattoos, but the others, about 4 or 5 others, use the blue butterflies. We've connected to Lilith, probably Psyche as well. Lilith being the original wife of Adam in some belief systems, and it's this cloning transhumanist thing that is and attached to 5G, artificial technology, intelligence technology, quantum technology. That to me is my the forging of that system. If we're talking about the fire, I think that that's what they're going head first with now into this next in 2026 is the rollout of that. And you're seeing a lot of distractions with Candice Owens having a go at Erica Kirk and all of this. I'll call it Jesuit gladiators for a laugh. It's just look over here whilst we roll out this technology. Yeah, what is your comments on that? Because that's to me is the forging of this beast system is happening this year.
Absolutely, I concur with that assessment because we do have all of these distractions going on out there in the quote unquote alternative media, where you have like Candace Owens out there infighting with some of these others, this Ben Shapiro, and all of this nonsense going on. It's all distraction. It's all theater. It's all political theater to keep you distracted from the real things going on, the real agendas that are rolling out quietly in the background. And it does have everything to do with transhumanism and with this digital control grid that they're trying to implement and put in place. And of course, all of the occult symbology is out there in the greater zeitgeist for us to see. And when you realize how they leverage some of these archetypal energies against the masses, then you could know a little something about it. And of course, I pointed out at the offset here, we are entering into the year of the horse. The horse is a hugely important symbol. And I don't know if you got towards the end of my book yet, where I talk about what the horse represents. But this has everything to do with the manifestation of dark entities here in this world taking over the human corpus in order to bring about and instantiate some changes in the world. And I think we're going to see a lot of that. This has everything to do with this digital transhumanist grid that they're putting in place. And what this represents is it's a hijacking of the human being, the temple of God, if you will, because know ye not, ye are the temple of God. The Bible clearly tells us. Well, this is what is referred to in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation as the abomination of desolation, where this spirit that does not belong within the human being will arrive in the human being and will declare itself God in the temple. You are the temple, remember. This is what all the transhumanist stuff is all about. And it's all about some of these dark entities from the other side beginning to manifest within human beings themselves and take over. And I know it sounds like a bridge too far for some people, but there's a lot to this. There's a very dark spiritual undertone to many of these things going on, and it has to do with these advents of these new technologies, these transhumanist technologies, this digital control grid they are attempting to build right now. This is what Rudolf Steiner referred to as the eighth sphere, and what the Hermeticists have referred to as the world of shells, and they are actively attempting to build this right now, because this is the way in which some of these dark entities on the other side escape their fate, or at least that's what they think. If they could switch places with human beings here, they can ride out the apocalyptic currents that are coming in the cycles of time. And that is what they think, and they could escape judgment and exist in physicality. That is what their plan is. That is what their purpose is. That is what they want to achieve. And they think in their hubris that they could escape judgment in the afterlife by doing this. So, this is what is at the heart of all of it. And of course, the vast majority of the human beings that are involved in the building of this system are wholly ignorant of all of this. The vast majority of them are what you might call secular humanists or atheists, and this, in and of itself, has become a problematic thing in this world because they deny all spiritual aspects of everything and are focused strictly on the hyper materialist paradigm, the physical material world that we detect with our five senses. This is where they are bound in their thinking. And this is all part of what Rudolf Steiner described as the spirit of Ahriman, this spirit of hyperphysicality. This is what they are attempting to build in this world. They are attempting to turn human beings essentially into automatons, meat suits, if you will, for dark spiritual powers that can manifest in them and escape their judgment and swap places with the human soul so that the human soul experiences the judgment rather than these non human entities whose ultimate destiny was to actually experience the judgment. And this is what they're trying to do here is swap places And like I said, I know it sounds like a bridge too far for most people to consider, but that is the spiritual reality behind it. And most people, they have their blinders on, and that's all by design. We've been indoctrinated in this world into not thinking in terms of the spiritual. And it's important that we do so because we are coming upon a time where many of these spiritual things, these spiritual aspects, are going to become more relevant to us. And we're going to be able to detect more of these spiritual things with our senses. The world's going to change dramatically over the course of the next several years, and our spiritual senses will begin to come back online. This is something we once had that has been lost to us. But now we're going to reacquire those spiritual senses, and we're going to begin to see things in this world that don't make sense in the physical scientific paradigm that they've handed us. And we're already seeing that, aren't we? There's a lot of things they simply cannot explain away with their quote unquote science, yet they attempt to all the time. Like these things don't make sense if you really critically think about them, but they still try to pass it off as the only way of accepting what we see before us in the world. They dismiss any spiritual aspect to it and try to stick to a strictly physical paradigm with all of it. And this is done on purpose, as we've said before. And I think we've preached on this ad nauseum at this point. This whole transhumanist control grid is all about this setting up this hyper physical, hyper material paradigm so that they can quantify everything in a way to make it more controllable for themselves and to separate themselves from anything spiritual. It's about separating man from God, and that doesn't work. The human soul has this divine spark within it, and we are a smaller creator being created in the image of God. And this is what makes the human being special. Now, these other spiritual powers, entities, intelligences, whatever you want to call them, these dark ones that are attempting to reach through from the other side through the etheric, and this is the key to everything, this etheric layer of this reality that they will deny outright in the auspices of the scientific mainstream, but it is most certainly there. This etheric portion is the key. It's the connecting point. It's the nexus point between the physical that we know here, that the Rosicrucians call the dense chemical region of physicality, and the connecting to the other spiritual worlds, the higher spiritual planes. This is the connecting point. It's the etheric. It's a finer layer of the physical reality. And I think we've gone through some of this stuff in the past, but it's important to lay this out so people have a better understanding. That's why I always recommend, if you could pick up the Rosicrucian Cosmos Conception, read through it a few times until it really sinks in as to what this all pertains to, because there's many different things in that book that will really give you a clearer view of what's going on in the world today. And much of the language has been obfuscated on purpose by the occultists, these dark occultists who run things and their minions in this world that try to get things done. So they have you thinking in terms of strictly physical things. Like, for example, in the Rosicrucian Cosmos Conception, they harken back to what they call the Saturn period, right? So Saturn, when most people think of Saturn, they're thinking of the planet Saturn, that sphere in the sky with the rings around it, the physical object. That's not what they're referring to. And this is what's been lost on most people. They can't seem to separate their preconceived notions of what's being talked about with what's really actually being revealed there. This is something totally different than what this planetary object is. Now, this planetary object has acquired some of the energetic principles of the original concept, but it is not one and the same thing. And this is how they kind of steer your thought processes into the hyperphysical paradigm. And that's what's been lost here in a lot of things. So if you could separate out the way you think about these symbols that are presented to you and realize it's not what you think it is. When they're showing you the symbol of Saturn, they're not talking about the planet in the sky, the physical object in the sky. Now, there is an energetic connection to that to some degree or another, but that is not actually what's being referenced. It's just a symbol. And that's the importance of symbology in all of this. But there's a connection point through the etheric to the spiritual principle behind it. And that's the important thing that's getting lost in the shuffle in modern humanity here. We need to focus on this etheric principle and on the spiritual side of things in the upcoming future, or we're going to get caught up in the soul trap that is the eighth sphere, that is the world of shells. We need to not get bound up in that system, the digital control grid. Anyway, I know I spoke for quite a length of time there, Richard. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts.
Well, this is new to me in terms of actually understanding it. So I want to go through what you speak about in your book. So I was trying to explain this to my wife yesterday on the drive back, which is probably not the best time to try and explain the Rosicrucian's conception of the cosmos, but while she's trying to drive at 8 o'clock at night in the dark, but I had a go. So from what I understand, I want to run this past you from reading in your book. There's 7 spheres, and you could almost see those days of the week, guys. I'm trying to explain it in a way that you can picture. So that goes from, so Monday would be, well, let's go in terms of the Jewish faith, because a lot of it goes around the Kabbalah. So Saturday would be Saturn. So it goes Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth, Jupiter, and then I always forget the next one. What's after Jupiter, Wayne?
Venus and then Vulcan.
Venus, then Vulcan. Seven spheres for each days of the week. If you start on Saturday and you end on the following Saturday, so you come back round. Is that
Saturday
right?
to Friday.
Saturday to
Goes
Friday.
Saturday to
Yeah,
Friday, and then it
yeah.
would repeat.
That's it goes back round. But we obviously in the West do Monday to Sunday, but obviously they're shifted over. So you could almost seem like they live in a different reality or polarity, definitely on a different time scale. And this goes even deeper when you look into the Kabbalah and the fact they have 2 moon calendars and all sorts of stuff going on. And they do that on purpose because you need to know that the function of what's going on. So Monday, so let's go Saturday to Friday, 7 days. Saturn, Sun, Sunday, Moon, Monday, Earth would be Tuesday, Jupiter would be Wednesday. The one that you just said that I forgot straight away would be Thursday.
Venus,
Venus would be Thursday, and
Vulcan.
Vulcan would be Friday. So remember, they're your spheres. Now, within each sphere, there are also 7 of the same around. So you've got one sphere. So take Saturn. Better not do that sign. Don't know how to do it on here without looking occult. Um, so they take Saturn, and within that Saturn sphere, which is your Saturday, you would have 7 cycles within that. Now, right now, according to what you were writing, Wayne, we are right in the middle of the week, pretty much. We're in Earth Day, which would be Saturday, Sunday, it'd be Tuesday. That'd be right. Tuesday, halfway through Tuesday, so halfway through Earth Day at Earth, just beyond. So within that day, we're heading towards Jupiter, but within that week, which you can see as aeons, we're heading towards Jupiter as well. That's where you get Jupiter rising. Am I getting this correct?
You're hitting on a lot of the key concepts here. Now, most people, if they're familiar with the days of the week and the attribution of mythology that they've been named after, they'll say, but wait a minute. Tuesday is Mars, relates to Mars. And that's the key because there's an important element that we get from Mars. And this is an archetype unto itself and a symbol unto itself. And we may have to actually go and do an entire show based upon what's being referenced here with Mars, this Martian element that is so prevalent here in Earth, because this has to do with the human being's blood, actually, when it comes down to it symbolically, the iron in the blood, the Iron Man. And of course, Elon Musk is all
Mm.
about Mars. And there's a reason for this, a very occult reason. It's not just because he loves science fiction and wants to fly rockets to Mars and set up a colony and all of that. That's all nonsense, and he knows it. Let's put it that way. He knows that that's not going to ever happen. All right. There's an important esoteric element to Mars that relates to this, and this has everything to do with what the Rosicrucians refer to as the Luciferic influence, the Luciferic spirits here. So this is all about hijacking this system, of which you just described here, Richard. It's a 7-tiered system. There's a stepping down process. We start with Saturn, then the sun, then the moon, and then the earth period. And this is the bottommost level. And then it climbs back up in 3 more steps to Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan in the cosmology here. And there's greater cycles of time and lesser cycles of time in the Rosicrucian system. The greater cycles of time they describe as periods. The lesser ones they describe as revolutions. And there's smaller portions even within those revolutions as well that will express. And they all express in the pattern of 7. And here's the thing where people sometimes get confused. It's not all very clearly delineated. There's crossover periods, crossover points where these things overlap at certain points. So we begin to see things begin to manifest in our current period that are expressions of the next period that we'll be entering into. So we have this point in which there's overlap between this. And we're arriving at that right now because according to the Rosicrucian system, we are just slightly past what they call the Earth revolution of the Earth period.
Yep.
So we are on the ascendant and we're heading towards this Jupiter revolution wherein new things are going to start happening with the human being and with the Earth itself. We're going to begin to have that spiritual connection back. That's what's truly intended through the natural evolutionary process that the Creator has instilled in this place. Now, here's the thing. We have some of these dark occultists and these dark powers that are kind of stragglers of the previous period that want to hijack this process and build something new, something entirely physical, so that they can escape that whole lot that they have in this system. This is what Steiner referred to as the 8th sphere. It's a separated sphere from these other spheres of the Rosicrucian system, thus the 8th sphere, because we've already delineated there's 7 of them, right? And it goes through repeating cycles. Mm-hmm. So after you hit the end of the 7th period, a new first period starts.
You go back to Saturn.
And this is the octave. So then we're 1 octave level higher. And this is key to everything because once you understand the octave is key to everything, Tesla advised us, in order to understand this reality, you need to think in terms of frequency and vibration. And as hokey as it sounds and new agey as it sounds, it is true. So we're at a point where we're going to begin resonating at a slightly higher level at this Jupiter frequency. That's what our natural lot is. That's what our natural next step is as human beings. That's what we're supposed to achieve. And we will. But there may be stragglers that get caught in this 8th sphere ideology and get caught up in that soul trap, because that's what it is. They get caught up in that Gnostic paradigm. You've heard all of this, the archons, the demiurge. That's what the building of this 8th sphere is all about. They want to convince as many people as possible that that's what we are already existing in, and that's not the truth. Because, see, if they get you to accept that, then you shrug your shoulders and you say, well, there's nothing we can do. I don't want anything to do with trying to fight against this anymore. I want to try to escape this system. So how do we do that? Well, the way they want you to think about it is if you can somehow escape the cycle or the system that naturally exists and go into this hyper-physical paradigm where you have, quote-unquote, immortality, and you could exist in this digital body or in some new physical form where you could transcend all of that and escape the judgment, then you're escaping the matrix. You see how they've inverted that whole idea? They're actually encapsulating you, capturing you into the matrix, in this soul trap, this 8th sphere, this world of shells. But they want you to believe otherwise. They want you to believe that right now you are trapped in that matrix. And in order to escape, you have to do this process. And it has everything to do with transhumanism. They call it self-guided evolution. They want you to think you're in control of your destiny and your future if you do this. And that's the whole really, really insidious thing about this. They're going to get people caught up in this way of thinking, and they're going to trick them into accepting the mark. And that's one of the keys here, too. there's a very esoteric connotation to all of that as well. So anyway, that's a lot that I've just talked about. So what's your thought process on this
No,
now,
it
Dave?
makes absolute total sense. The more you explain it, the more it makes sense of things that haven't made sense. The contradictions of what certain people and certain belief systems come out with, then they don't make sense when you logically look at them. They mean the opposite clearly of what they're saying. What really fascinated me with that? Let's lay that out again. You've got 7 days of the week: Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth, Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan. Obviously, you mentioned that from Star Trek. People will not understand that. And then after that week, it's supposed to loop back round for another week in this concept, but they want to plug in an eighth there to catch you in. So if you look at it in the Olam Haba, New World, World to Come, Kabbalistic term, it's the world to come. It's this new world order. It's not a world that's been established. And if you look in the Gnostics term, it'll be the matrix. It'll be somewhere you're trapped in as a digital entity that they believe we're already in already. But if you look at these concepts together, they do work together. They are mixtures of the same ingredients coming out in different ways. What you mentioned there, though, wanted you to just touch upon for myself, really, um, is that you said that Tuesday would be seen as Mars, but obviously in this concept, in the Rosicrucians, you've got that as Earth. So what's the concept here with the Mars being layered over the top, so to speak, of the Earth sphere? What is the connection there?
Well, as I had alluded to, this has to do with human blood as being the vehicle of soul. This is what has largely been regarded and hidden from the masses by many of these different esoteric teachings and occult fraternities for the longest time. You see, what makes us warm blooded? The iron in our blood. Well, this is associated with Martian energies, the energies of Mars. Mars is the planet of iron. We have iron in our blood. Now, what do we know about those who consider themselves to be the elites of this world? What are they known as? They're the blue bloods. They have this cold blooded type of ensoulment in their blood. Okay. Now, you could go back, you could look at, say, the horseshoe crab as an example of this. This is a cold blooded creature. It has blue blood. They use their blood in a lot of medicinal purposes and things like that because this is based around copper. It's the copper in their blood that makes their blood blue. And that makes them cold blooded, which means they need exterior warmth in order to function. That's the difference between a cold blooded animal and a warm blooded animal. We're warm blooded because of that infusion of iron, and this has to do with some of the things that they talk about, harkening back to what they call the war in the heavens. And a lot of this has all been talked about ad nauseum by a lot of different people from a lot of different perspectives. But this goes back in the cosmogony about when Earth initially became formed in this current period. It had been infused by these luciferic entities or powers, spirits from that Martian ideology that have infused themselves here and opened and awakened up man's soul into the individuation process. And this has to do with the infusion of iron in the blood and this warm bloodedness. So it's all about that. That's the connection here. So we have a lot of these Martian energies present now. What else is Mars associated with? Well, Mars was the god of war, right? So we have all of this warfare and conflict. This is about when you go back and you look at the teachings of the Luciferic philosophy, they teach that man became self aware at a certain point. This is all encoded in the film 2001 A Space Odyssey, when in the beginning the apes were there and the monolith appeared. The monolith represents Mars, the Luciferic infusion, the energies from that. And then all of a sudden, these ape men, these early ape men, became self aware and they became violent because of this. And they started infighting. And thus, according to the system, this is when man became self-aware, became individuated. The individuation process began at that point when you look at that. And this has everything to do with this infusion of these luciferic forces. Now, Rudolf Steiner describes this in various ways. He refers to these Lucifer energies and the Ahrimanic energies, which are the flip side of the same coin, in my view. So the Ahrimanic forces are those things that steer us towards this physical manifestation, this hyperphysicality. The Luciferic side of that same coin has more of a connection back to spiritual ideologies, but it's all filtered through this lens of Mars, the red. So do you understand? So we have the red, and of course, the Ahrimanic would be represented by the blue. And I know you're understanding what I'm saying, and I hope I'm not losing other people out there. But it's always about this polarity principle. So you have these two separate polarities of what I view as the same force, but Steiner describes it as two separate forces. But what it's done is it has been a stepping process, a necessary stepping process for man to express himself in full individuation here in the physical. It's part of the natural system. But we are supposed to be back on the spiritual ascendant side at the other side of this. But those dark occultists who run things in this world are trying their best to stave that off and keep us trapped in this hyper-physical paradigm. They don't want us to spiritually elevate. They don't want us to reconnect back with these spiritual senses that we've lost in this individuation process, in the stepping down into the dense physical here. They want to just capture that and build on that rather than have man's spirit elevate and him regain his connection back to the spiritual worlds. So this is what it's all about, and this is where the Martian influence comes in. It's the infusion of, well, a lot of different things. And like I said, we might have to actually do an entire show on this. And I hope I'm not rambling too long here, but we've heard of the different ages of mankind, right? The Bronze Age, the Iron Age. This is where it all comes in, all right? It's all these same elemental ideas and precepts that cross over into the different bounds of all of these different symbolic things that we accept in our physical paradigm here today. And there's a whole philosophical principle behind all of it. And that's why we have even those names for things, the Iron Age. There's a reason. It's because of this martial influence that's been here. And of course, it has everything to do with the individuation process when it comes down to the natural cycles of time and order here. Because in dense physicality is where we begin to achieve the individuation process. Now, if you go back through the Rosicrucian system again, you may know, if you've studied it enough, and you go through Heimdall's works on this, you'll find out that there's different, what they call group spirits, that seem to guide and direct the evolution of different animals, plants, minerals, things like that through the course of time from the outside. Well, part of the individuation process is this stepping down to this lowest version, the densest form in physicality. And now we've been completely separated from the other spiritual aspects of it. But the next step in that is to become recapitulated back to the spiritual side with our full individuation in place. And what these dark controllers of this place want to do is they want to invert that idea. They want the hive mind, the collective mind mentality for all of this. They want to achieve a type of artificial group spirit, as the Rosicrucians describe it, so that they control all of it, all of physicality. Do you understand what I'm saying? So they're trying to completely do away with the individuation process, which is our natural lot through this evolutionary process, and redirect it into this collective hive mind, this world brain. How many times have we heard that hearkened upon in science fiction? It all connects. And as much as people might be uncomfortable in recognizing this, these are actual spiritual truths that you can find if you just delve deep enough. And I hope I'm not speaking over people's heads, and I hope I'm not losing anybody there. And I know it's a bridge too far for some people to consider, but this is certainly what the plan is and what's been going on for a very long time now. So I'd love to hear more of what you have to say here, Richard.
I think it's fascinating to myself is that the use of seven, and see one of your friends is Crow 777, and obviously he would have, believe, probably known of this stuff. I'm sure that's why you discuss it between you guys. Um, we have the 7 days of the week. Obviously, we have the almost like in your DNA when you look at it, and they say all your cells regenerate between 7 and 10 years. I'm sure that's got something to do with it as well. Whether that's and I try to explain this, and whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. What matters is the system of which the belief is based upon. It's the regeneration, it's completion. Seven is completion. In Kabbalah, it's the regeneration of something new. The eighth day would be the start of the new week, or back to the first, back to one. But they want to add on an eighth day and start us off in a new, complete direction. So I get all that sevens and that's why we see the sevens coming up all the time. The Sabbath, we see the 7 year tribulations as well, and even as a halfway tribulation point where they put in where they're going to do the halfway rapture. You either do it at the start or you get a halfway point as well. You can go out, which will be about now. So if you guys listen to what we were saying, with all of those days of the week being 7 days of the week, the Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth, Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan being your 7 days of the week. If we're in the middle of Earth, we're in Earth now, halfway through the week on the Tuesday. If you go from the Saturday, because that's the time scale that they go in the week, not from the Monday. We are halfway through that day, so we're all about 1 o'clock during the afternoon ish on the Tuesday at the moment. So we're halfway through it. So they obviously see that the halfway point is almost like a weak point because you're down at the lowest. So say you're going down the stairs in one house in a block of flats, and you're going down the stairs here to get to the next block of flats, but your mate's he lives parallel to you, but you have to go down to go up. So we are down on the lowest point at the moment, which is what the Gnostics would call the matrix, to go, and we're starting to go back up again to get back to your mate's house. The best way I can put it. So we've stepped down, but we're actually stepping up now, as you call it, the octaves, which I think is great, which makes total sense of the uh, the song Hallelujah and the music in that, which I think it has a lot of connotations to building stuff as well. The vibrations. So we're starting to vibrate up, and they want to cap it off so we don't get that stuff. But the more they're pushing on it, the more they're vibrating it because they're going against the tide. So quite clearly that the more they do this stuff, the more they prove people like us right. So almost like we're going out in the dark, people like us, people that do this work, whistling the tune that's going to be played in the future, and people are not believing it, but they're starting to hear it. And the more they do this stuff, the louder that tune gets, and the more we're proven right. And they are on a losing streak because they can only prove us right. The key is to prove us right before too many can stop it. They want to pull your trousers down before you can get up for too many steps up the stairs. Especially, but that's my thing. I just weird analogies that work in my head. Um, so I get that, and isn't it? Haven't we seen in some of the Freemasonry symbology? There's two sets of stairs each side of the picture. Is that just in my mind, or was that Rosicrucian? Have I mixed them
No,
up?
that's certainly all there too. All of that's inherent, and you're. I love your analogy, by the way. That perfectly describes it. We went down the steps, and now we're at the bottom part of the landing, and we're trying to get back up to that next state. And what they want to do is they want to keep us down there on the landing. They don't want us to elevate to that next level. So it is a great analogy, and that does pretty much describe all of that. And yes, stairs in esoteric Freemasonry and other different systems are hugely and monumentally important symbols in all of this because that's what it's about. It's about stepping up to these next octaves in the level here. And I'll give you another little key for understanding here. Look at the works of Walter Russell. He'll really make a lot of things clear. If you read through his book, The Universal One, you'll know how all of this stuff begins to connect, how the octave is key here, and how the ways in which we think about the physical world in which we live are flawed. And all of this has been done on purpose. We've been steered in the direction of this materialist science, disregarding all the spiritual connotations of things. And that's incorrect. You have to have a firm understanding of the spiritual side or the etheric side of nature, as well as the dense physical region of nature. And that's where science in the modern era has really missed the boat. They've been using this as a control system for us, modern science. And you see how rigid the thinking is of many of these people who trust the science, right? It's a very rigid way of thinking. They tell you science is just like magic, except it's true. And you see how they make that distinction. They try to make anything spiritual sound hokey or nonsensical. But what they believe is absolute veritas. That's how they try to express it. So that's what's been done here. So scientism, properly called, is one of their vehicles of trying to steer us in this hyper materialist paradigm state into this eighth sphere mentality. So they're trying to beat the spirituality out of people through the use of this science. And this goes very, very deep. And it's been going on for a long time now. So there's a lot there. And like I said, as far as this Martian influence thing, we might have to do a whole separate show on that at some point.
Yeah, because that's new to me. And it makes sense. It makes total sense. But also, I think people kind of like put it in a context of you obviously got red and blue, your polarities there as well. So the red-blooded us comes from this Martian influence. The blue-blooded, where that comes from, you said copper. Does that copper have anything to do with being able to use the Ark of the Covenant in their blood? Because I always the Kohathites were someone who became a group of of the tribe of Israel, one of the tribes of Israel. I think it was Joseph, though I'm not quite, or one of those. Anyway, one of the sub tribes of the tribes, one of the compartmentalized. They were able to use the Ark of the Covenant, which may be symbolic, I think, as some sort of ability to use portals, and I believe it's because of their blood. So if their blood type is different, which makes total sense, and it comes into the hybrid bloodlines, where does that copper bloodline come from? If ours comes from a Mars influence and ours is warm-blooded, they're cold-blooded, which makes sense as why they have to live under Earth because they can't live out here, which would make sense why the clones are done on under Earth because they can't live on top. Where does that blue-blooded influence actually come from? Like the likes of David Icke would say, like the reptilian element of it. But where does that blue blood come from in terms of the cosmology we're talking about? If ours comes from Venus, where would theirs come from?
That would be ours comes from Mars, the iron.
Sorry, Mars. Yeah, sorry, that's what I mean. Yeah.
You answered your own question, Richard. The copper relates to Venus.
All
And
right.
what is Venus? It's a higher octave of where we're at, but it's also a lower octave from where we came from. You see, these things cross the plane on the Rosicrucian system at the same spot here. So this would be harkening back. We're in the Earth period. Next is Jupiter, and then beyond that is Venus. Well, take two steps back on that chart from where we are: Earth, Moon, Sun. So the Sun and Venus, these are the representations of this copper influence. So this is said to be a holdover from the older iteration of mankind during that Sun period in the Rosicrucian system. But they're also hearkening forward to this Venus system, this Venus period. So it's about the old golden age idea again, isn't it? When it comes down to it. And of course, they refer to Saturn as the golden age. So the true golden age would be Vulcan, actually, in the next step, because Vulcan will cross over on this plane. And I have a diagram in the new book showing this that I got from the Rosicrucian Cosmos Conception that shows all of this in a diagram to make it clear. And it's hard to describe this just in words without that picture. But Vulcan is on the same plane as Saturn. But see, what they're doing is they're using this inversion principle and they're trying to lock us back at that original part of the cycle. They don't want us to go the next octave higher. They want to trap us here where we're at right now and build this eighth sphere that they could control and be the gods thereof. That's what it's all about. It's about trying to usurp the natural order.
I wonder if we did this experiment, if you ever thought about this, is the sigil of Saturn, how it's made. and drawn between in the cube of Saturn with the numbers. If you laid the sigil of Saturn over the top of the two stairs of the two like stairways of the Rosicrucian system, if it had a some sort of alchemical chemistry element to it that it was trying to attach the levels of say the Saturn to the moon, and because it goes in a certain order and the pattern is clearly a straight lined pattern like you would get in, and also
You
the
know,
Balmoral
get,
guys
Richard,
have
if
it.
you do that, you'll get the Kabbalah tree of life.
Well, there you go then.
See, I hope it's all connecting for you now, because that's most certainly what this is. It's a these are systems that they've tried to use to quantify these ideas, and they've been around for a long time. And there are those within the high orders and echelons of some of these occult teachings that have a very profound understanding of how these path systems all work in that way, and how it ties over into not only our material science but also attaches to the spiritual science side of it. And that's the missing portion we have in reality right now, in this world we live in. The spiritual science has been ignored and pushed aside, cast aside, because we've been indoctrinated to believe that any of those types of notions are silly and nonsensical. And as human beings, as we've been more, how should we say, involuted into this physical paradigm, into this physical shell that we're in now, the dense chemical region in which we exist, the more we've been indoctrinated in those ways of thinking, the more separated we are from those spiritual concerns and ideas. But we're at the point now in the natural order of time where we're going to start to reawaken to these spiritual realities. Spiritual science will become more manifest and will combine with our material science in order to advance us to the next state, what our true destiny is as human beings, to achieve our full potential as human beings. We can't ignore it any longer. And we're getting to the point where all of this stuff is becoming more visible and relevant to us in the modern era, where the material science will only take you so far. And what it really does is it sets limitations upon us as human beings. Whereas the spiritual science, there's no ceiling. We could go much further using the spiritual sciences in conjunction with what we understand about material sciences in order to bring about new manifestations in this reality and to achieve our full potential as human beings. But there are those who oppose that and want to maintain control. And they can't control a human being with no limits, can they? Think about that. The human creative force has no limits. And that's the problem. So they seek to cap the limitation on that so they can control that.
They were also, so this is why I think we're seeing this whole resurrection is probably the best word I could find of Christianity and Islam and the three Abrahamics here being clashed against each other, obviously. But what we're seeing is a false version, a fake version of Christianity, especially here in the UK, but the US too with evangelical. This fake hijacking of, I believe, from what you're saying there, a genuine awakening to something more spiritual. Um, but they are like they are doing with the artificial intelligence. They're taking that energy and they're taking the plug out, like you see in the old telephone things in the Second World War, First World War. They're not putting the plug in the right way, the where it's supposed to go. They're putting it in a completely different space. And that's what I feel like they're doing. They're taking something authentic where people are yearning for something else, something more, that's not transhumanism, it's not technology, that they're learning for connection and they're plugging it in elsewhere. And I don't know if the likes of Tommy Robinson understand that. I doubt that they do, but that certainly to me is clearly a fake, rubbish copy of something authentic, whatever that might mean. And I'm not a religious person, but I have faith in people, and I have faith in energies, and I have faith in spiritual awareness, or whatever you call it. Um, that clearly is fake. It's clearly soulless, empty. It's obvious it's empty. So there is a hijacking right now of people's yearning to step up, isn't there?
Absolutely, and that's the key to all of this. They're trying to take people's actual religious or spiritual convictions and weaponize them against them and steer them into a false paradigm with it. That's essentially what's been done here. You see, there's no stopping an idea that's time has come, if you've ever heard that old expression. And we're at this critical junction point in the cyclical nature of time right now, where we are on the elevation path spiritually, where mankind is opening back up spiritually to reconnect back to these more spiritual senses that we once had. And they're trying to usurp this whole thing and redirect people's spiritual yearnings somewhere into a legalistic system. That's what they're about. This is all about dogma, man made dogma. So they're trying to take people's actual religious or spiritual ideologies and senses and ideals and steer them into a dogmatic, legalistic system. Legalism, religious legalism. That's what's being done right now. That's why they're trying to reapply Christian fundamentals here in the Western world in order to reestablish more of this legalistic type control over people, because they know they're losing a hold of that because of the natural cycles and course of time, and they know their time frame is limited. They have a limited window of opportunity to try to hijack this whole spiritual awakening that's going on and steer it into the direction that they want and put us
But
in
as
that
as
neat
a
little box.
Christian man, Wayne, you're someone who say you are religious and you do subscribe to the Christian faith. Do you see a difference between what is become the Orthodox Christianity to a faith or a spiritual connection to what Christianity was initially or originally or supposedly or even just the heart of it supposed to be? Because people will be going, well, hang on a minute, Wayne's Christian, so he would want us to to do what it says in the. I know that you don't mean that, but I'd like the audience to understand what you see as someone who does subscribe to that faith as the difference between what they're trying to sell as Christianity or religion and what you see as it is. Because you're someone who is open minded, you'll read the books, you'll read Manly P. Hall, you read everything because you understand, like I do, the knowledge is neutral and it's just fascinating. But you, as a Christian man who said you're Christian, what's the difference here?
Well, the thing is, what's happened is through the course of time, and you could be a Christian and acknowledge this, is control systems have taken a hold of the original works that brought about Christianity into the world and have turned it into a dogmatic, legalistic system. And it's created division within the Christian church itself. That's why there's so many different denominations of Christianity, and there's so many different false teachings, and there's so many different legalistic and dogmatic teachings in each of these different denominations. And one thinks it's more correct than the other, and you have this division between the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, and all of this stuff gone on. And all of that is what I'm telling you is that's all man made. That's all dogma. If you want a true understanding of what Christianity truly is, it's not a religion. It's a relationship with God, a one on one relationship with Jesus Christ and with the Creator Himself through this mediary that is intermediary that is Jesus Christ, who is God Himself incarnate, stepped into physicality here so that we can have that connection back to God. He understood that when man had taken the original fall and separated himself from this spiritual connection back to Him, that he needed an intermediary to step in to reestablish that connection. And that's what this is all about. It's about connecting back to your Creator. It's about having that right spiritual relationship with the Creator. That's essentially what it is. And it's a relationship. It's not a religion. You don't need to have a priest. You don't need to go confess your sins to a priest or anything like that. Jesus Christ was the intermediary. You don't need any of that other stuff that has become man made dogmatic religion. You don't need to necessarily go to a church service every Sunday and do that kind of thing and put on the facade. And that's largely what a lot of it is in corporate worship. It's a facade. in order to have that one-on-one relationship with God. It's an individual matter. Now, there is a time and a place for this religious expression, for this religious worship, this corporate worship, if you want to call it that. That's what our modern religious systems and our churches have become. Now, this is an interesting facet, too. If you go back to what the original intention of what they called the mysteries or the mystery schools of antiquity were, this was about your individual one-on-one relationship with God. That's what the original intention was to the mysteries. So this was your way of individually acknowledging and worshiping God, was through these mysteries. Whereas you go to church on Sunday or whatever, and you sing songs and you worship and you listen to the preacher speak the word, that's corporate worship. That is where the group goes to express that type of connection to God or worship. That's all been usurped and weaponized against mankind. And man has been indoctrinated into believing that you need to go through a lot of this dogma to have that right relationship with God. And that's the only way. And that leads to legalistic thinking, and that you're never good enough. You're never quite good enough. And that is an incorrect view. It's all about the relationship. It has more to do with your individual relationship to the Creator than it does with your corporate relationship. Now, that corporate expression should come from you at some point if you do have that individual relationship. And this is wherein the difference lies in what they call in the secret teachings the mystery religions and the exoteric expression of that. So churches today, mainline churches, have become an exoteric version of that, but it's devoid of the esoteric or the inner work. That's the problem. That's the problem we have. Most religions are just an exoteric showing. It's all a facade, it's all for show, and there's no real essence to it. The essence is in that individual relationship. So that's what's been lost. And I hope that makes sense to you, and I hope that resonates with people out there. You can have that right connection to God without having to go through all the pomp and circumstance of all that other stuff. But there's nothing wrong with doing that stuff, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with going to church and openly worshiping with the group. But that's not ultimately what leads you to your connection with the spiritual. And they've weaponized that and tried to steer people away from that individual one-on-one relationship by doing just all of these external physical things as a substitute for that. This is the very essence of Antichrist. Okay? An artificial knockoff, an alternative Christ, alternative God. So that's the viewpoint that I come from in all of this, and I hope that makes sense to people.
Well, it makes lovely sense. And that straight away, you're describing the principles that we've talked about many times. The Klepoth, the world of shells. They've created a shell, like a shell company, shell corporation, a version of something else without the essence and the heart and the soul of it. It's an empty vessel, an empty version, a hollow version of something else to hide within. Some people are doing horrible things within that shell, knowingly. Some of them are just going along and not really realizing that it's the shell of what it was meant to be. They've hollowed out the original concept of what it was supposed to be. So now it is empty. It's soulless. And then we come back to the homunculus and the golem.
You get it. That's better expressed than how I could express it. Thank
It's
you.
the same thing. Well, I understood it from you, and I understand these things from you, and this is why it's such a fascinating show. And there's nothing like that out there because it's reaching into what you guys already know. You just need someone to remind you, or just tell you you're not going crazy, because you don't need to learn this stuff. They've put all of these complicated systems around very simple teachings that you're trying to undo the complicated system to get back to the very simple teaching that you don't need all of that. But the complication is the chaos that they wrap it in so you can't get to it. That's what I take from it anyway.
Exactly. They've made a tangled web of all of it. They've overcomplicated a lot of these different things. What it's all about at the end of the day, it's your relationship with God, the Creator. That's it. That's what it's about. You just need that connection, and all the other things will be added. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. It tells us in the very scripture. So you don't go out and do all the physical facade stuff, the surface level stuff. Like, I go to church every Sunday, I faithfully give money to the church, I do this and that, but then you live like hell the rest of the week.
Mm.
You know, that's not what it's about. It's about that connection, that one-on-one relationship with God, and everything else will be added unto you after you have that connection. That's the important precept, and that's largely what's been lost and weaponized against us by modern religious systems. That's essentially what's been done.
So in 2026, then we're seeing, in my kind of take on this, and it's been a brilliant show, the stepping up of humanity. We're going back up the flight of stairs. We're resonating higher, and they are going to push this AI out as a way of compressing that, dampening that down, and then hijacking that. That's what I see really kicking off this year. How about you?
I concur 100%. They're going to do everything in their power to try to usurp this whole process. They're going to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks because of just the cyclical nature of the time, the spirit of the time we're stepping into, the zeitgeist that is 2026. And we didn't even get to the horse symbolism yet. But so that'll be another show unto itself as well. But it certainly keep your eyes open for things that are going to occur in 2026. It's going to be a pivotal year.
Yeah, there's well with the horse symbolism as well. Yeah, and the what's the one with the wings? Can't remember his name now. What's the one with the horse with the wings?
Pegasus.
Pegasus. They're all over the Freemasonic stuff here in the city of London. Feet on the floor and wings going into the air. So we have that connection as well. Where can people find your work and your new book, which is absolutely excellent? This is the stuff that people should be taught at school. It would solve a lot of problems.
Oh, it sure would, but they wouldn't dare teach that. You can't control people who know a little too much about these spiritual things. But anyway, people could find me at www.alchemicaltechrevolution.com. My new book is titled The Enoch Polarity and the End of Time. That's available pretty much anywhere you buy books. And I have a direct link for it on my landing page on my website. So it's easy for people to find. Where could the good people find you, Richard?
And they can find me at iconic.com with most of my work. I'm going to be doing a lot more free stuff on YouTube, out and about because I need to build that up. And you can find me on Substack as well. Just put Richard Willett or Some May Conspire in Substack there. And that's where all my stuff is. And on X, I do post quite a lot on X. Because it's not going to be around for much longer for us lot. So raw, was it WTF Rich, WTF Rich on there. You can find me, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. But it's been an excellent show. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, man. All right, everyone. Have a splendid ringing in of the new year of 2026, and hopefully we'll be on the elevated path thereafter. If enough of us wake up to the things that the dark occultists who run things in this world want to bring into fruition, and we oppose that, then we can elevate to the next level and we can have a better future. I always have hope for a better future, and I think we're making a difference, Richard. Things that we do and people like us are doing, it's getting out there and it's resonating with people, even though the algorithms do their best to really stifle that. We're having an effect, though.
Well, as you say, there's nothing like an idea that that time's come, and this is definitely going to be the year I think when we're going to see this AI stuff push out. So keep your eyes open. I'll see you in a week's, about 2 weeks time. Take care. Bye.